Hi everyone, this is Miss D, and today I'm going to be presenting a drawing tutorial where I will be walking you through the steps of drawing the generic proportions of a human face, something that we don't see enough in these mask-ridden times. So for today, what I'm going to be showing you is just a way to do this. It's not the only way. There are lots of different ways to draw a human face. This is just one of the techniques that I have always found to be pretty useful whenever I'm laying out the proper proportions. So what I'm going to be starting with is a 2H pencil. This is just a very light pencil. And when I start, I'm going to be very loose and sketchy. For these first few steps, we're just sort of putting everything in the right place. Don't feel like you have to draw perfectly straight and perfectly dark to begin with. You want to keep a very, very light touch and just keep it very, very loose, because most of these lines that we're going to be drawing in the first couple of steps, we will be erasing after we kind of have everything in the right place. So just cannot stress that enough. These are underlying shapes. This is not your final drawing in these first few steps. So for drawing a face, just front on, just trying to put everything in the right place, which is what we're doing today. I'm going to start with a couple of basic shapes. And the very first thing I'll start with is just your basic circle. And again, notice, I'm keeping it very loose and sketchy. There's lots of scribbly sort of lines here, and I am not trying to make it perfect right off the bat, because we will be erasing a lot of this. I had an art teacher in college who said, draw scribbly and find the line that you want within the scribbles, if that makes any sense. So start with a very light and loose circle, and I'm drawing it a little bit big. You can see, like, if this is the proportion of my paper, I'm taking up a little bit of room because we want to have a larger shape within to draw our features. Now down the center of the circle, if the circle is about this big, so just a little guideline there, I'm going to draw a line going down the center of the circle and extend that line almost the length of the circle itself. You can see where I drew a little dot here as a guideline. A little bit closer. Alright, so this is just sort of getting the framing of the face. Now I'm going to come down from the sides of the circle, and this is really difficult because what we're going to be doing is trying to get the symmetrical lines of the jaw, and symmetry is so very difficult, and that's why we start off light and we draw very, very lightly to begin with, because most of the time when we're dealing with symmetry, we're going to be erasing a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming down from the side of the circle, and I'm going to do just a very softly curved jaw. You guys know every face is a little bit different. Some are much more angular, some are much more round. What I'm drawing is just sort of generic. But if I do have an angle to the jaw, I want it to be, when I start to curve in, I want those to be, those inward curves to be symmetrical. So again, just kind of drawing lightly and loosely. I'm going to go in. You can go in at the end with a pen or with a darker pencil and clean up the lines you want to keep and erase the ones that you want to get rid of. But the idea is just to make sure that what happens on the left side is pretty close to what happens on the right side. And again, don't feel bad if you have a lot of erase marks on this, because if this is something that you don't do very often, you will have to erase a lot because symmetry is hard. Now, where I have the base of my circle where it meets the frame of my face, I'm going to draw a straight line across. And again, this is just generic proportions because the human face has it has infinite variations and possibilities. I'm just trying to show you guys where the average lines would be. I'm going to hit my autofocus to see it looks a little bit blurry there. Alright, good morning. So now what I'm going to be doing is figuring out where I'm going to be placing my eyes. So I'm going to put a little dot. I'm going to find the center of these two areas, and I'm going to put just a little dot right there. And this is where, if you're looking at a face straight on, oops, this is where your pupils would fall, and it's about at the halfway point between each of these spaces. Okay, now I want to know, again, just working out proportions. These are not actually your features just yet. Just working out our proportions. I'm going to take and draw a triangle coming down from the center of those two eyes, and this is about where my nose, the tip of my nose, would fall. And then where I have the inward curve of my jaw, this is about where my mouth will fall. And typically an average human mouth is going to fall between the pupils of your eyes. And you can even test this with your own face. If you put your fingers down the center of your eyes and drag them downwards, you will find that the average mouth falls between those two spaces. Okay, so this is not, again, the features of your actual face. This is just figuring out where everything is going to be located. So this would be your typical proportions for a human face. Now, as far as ears are concerned, again, just sort of using your eyes as a guideline, if you put your fingers, and don't poke yourself in the eye when you do this, if you set your fingers along the top of your eye and slide them outwards towards the tips of your ears, you will find that the tips of your ears are about equal to where your eyes would be. And again, just not really drawing ears, just drawing the shapes. And then if you put your fingers on your bottom lip and slide them outwards, you will find that the bottom of your ears in the average face, and again, there are a few slight variations, but in your average face, typical proportions is going to line up with your bottom lip. A lot of mistakes that people make is we feel like the ears need to be a lot bigger or a lot smaller than they actually are. So those would be, again, just typical facial proportions. And then the neck, you don't want to make it like spaghetti neck, and you don't want to make, well, I guess you could make Superman neck if you wanted to, but just the typical neck is going to fall inside the curve of that jaw. Okay? So now we have everything in place. Now it's time for the fun part, which is to add features. And again, this is something that once you know the facial proportions, you can have so much fun with this because there are an infinite number of variations. What we're going to do, again, is just very, very generic. Not a lot of details, just sort of putting everything into the right place. And in this, you can really have fun with your style and with your own sort of variations on features. But at this point, we're going to start darkening the lines we want to keep and erasing the ones that we want to get rid of. So I'm going to stay with my light pencil to begin with, but as I find the lines I want to keep, I'm going to move to a darker pencil. You can also move to a pen if you would like to. But what I'm going to do, and again, this is so difficult because symmetry is not our friend sometimes. The highest arch of the eye is going to fall right where we drew that little dot. And how big do we make this arch? That is a good question. You're going to play with this a little bit, but the idea is, and you do not have to draw this is just as an explanation, is take a look at how big you made that arch and look at the space between your two arches. You should be able to fit an arch of a similar size between those two arches. Then on either side of the face, you should fit an arch that is about half that size. And you don't have to draw this. This is just illustrating the proportions. So if you drew an arch that's the appropriate size for your typical average facial proportions, you should be able to fit a similarly sized eye arch between the two, and about half that on either side. And again, like I said, these are just generic proportions. Of course, there's going to be subtle variations with every single face that you see if you're looking around. Okay? Next, we're going to draw our pupils. And this is something that, again, can add a lot of personality to the face that you draw. Remember that these dots were just guidelines. They're not actually our pupils. And most people, whenever they're first starting out, they make the mistake of going ahead and drawing a full circle underneath the arch, which if you do that, your character or the person that you're drawing is going to look a little bit crazy-eyed. I always use the example, if you think about one of my favorite Disney princesses is from Tangled, and Rapunzel looks a little bit different from every other Disney princess, because instead of drawing her eyes naturally, they show the whole pupil whenever she gets really excited, so she looks a little bit wild-eyed and crazy sometimes. On an average resting face, you will not see the full circle of the pupil. Usually, the top of it is going to be cut off by the top of the eyelid. So you won't see the full circle. Okay. Now for your eyebrows, again, I'm drawing a guideline. You don't have to draw these guidelines. They're typically going to come up from the outside and inside corners of your eye. And again, this is just generic because everybody is different. Usually it starts a little bit thicker on the inside, and as it follows the curve of your eye, it tapers off. And again, symmetry, symmetry, symmetry. Trying to keep everything the same on both sides can be so difficult. So don't be afraid, or don't feel frustrated, I should say that. Don't feel frustrated if you feel like, oh my goodness, one is up higher, one's not perfect, I'm going to have to erase a whole bunch. This is why at this stage of the drawing, we're keeping it very, very light, because everybody at some point is going to have to erase something. Okay, so that's okay. And just keeping it light and loose, a little bit scribbly is just fine. I drew sort of narrow eyebrows. You can make them thicker or thinner, however you want to have your eyebrows look. Just sort of a average, like I said, generic proportions. Now for the nose, I'm going to come in from the corners of the eyes. Again, noses there are It's just an infinite number of possibilities. And I once read a book on drawing faces, and it says if you really want to capture a portrait that really looks like the person you're trying to draw, the tip of the nose is one of the most crucial parts of your drawing. Now, I'm just going to draw just a very, very simple nose, but you can play with this and have so many different options. Inside the very apex of that triangle, I'm doing just a sort of a soft U. And then on either side, I'm putting some parentheses on either side of that triangle. Now, you can add nostrils, you can add a straight line if you wanted to. You could make it more curved, you can make it more turned up. Again, just an infinite number of possibilities with those features. Again, just doing the sort of typical generic layout. Now, for the mouth, I'm coming straight down from the center of the nose, and we're going to have that little divot. Some people have a very pronounced divot in the center of their mouth. Some people, it's more of a straight line. I'm going to create one that's about, like I said, average. And the corners of the mouth are going to go downwards just a little bit. Some curve upwards, some curve downwards. I'm going to come down. Okay. So at this point, I have the basic structure of a human face. From here, you can have a lot of fun playing with different variations. I am picking up now my darker pencil. This is an ebony pencil. You can use an ink pen if you'd like, or you can just stick with your same pencil, just start pressing down a little bit more darkly. But now is the time that we will start to add details. And this is the point where you will start to smooth out your lines and find the line that you want to keep, and we'll erase the lines that we want to get rid of at this stage of the drawing. And you can do things to sort of add texture or details to your drawing, like right here. I'm going to do some swift downward strokes to give more of a feeling of hair to the eyebrows. I'm going to hit that autofocus. Okay, you can see that. And I'm making my brows a little bit thick. Like I said, you can kind of thin them out or make them as bushy or as thin as you want. If you are a makeup diva and you want them to look more painted on, you can do that too. And I'm keeping the details kind of simple, but you can go in and add more realistic touches if you'd like. So you have like a little bit of a lid there with the eye. I'm going to draw my pupil here. And you'll notice again, it's not a full circle. And you can even do little touches, like adding a little bit of a highlight there. Usually, there's a bit of a shadow at the top of the pupil. Gives it a bit more depth. If you want to have some eyelashes, you don't want them to go straight up A lot of people tend to make that mistake, but if you'll look at everybody's eyes around you, or you can look at your own eyes in a mirror, an eyelash tends to have a little bit of a curve, so it's going to start at the top of the eyelid and it's going to have a curve upwards. And sometimes it even dips a little bit below. That eyelid. Okay. And again, just kind of darkening the lines we want to keep. And adding little touches, little details as we go. And there are some places where, I talk about symmetry and things like keeping everything equal on both sides. As you make the faces have a little bit more personality, sometimes a face will not be totally symmetrical. And that's okay too if it's not, because sometimes in real life, faces are not totally even. I know you can't tell because I'm wearing a mask all the time, but when I smile, one side of my mouth tips up higher than the other. Here, and again, just kind of ears, and again, there's a lot of variation on this. I'm just sort of doing a few generic details for the ears. But you'll know that there are so many shapes and variations. Some people have ears that are connected to the side of the inside of the jaw. Some people have dangly earlobes. You can look around and see so many different variations. The last thing, and I'm not going to finish off the face in this video because it's getting a little bit long, but the last thing to point out is the hair. Whatever you decide to do for your hairstyle, remember that unless somebody has a shaved head, or if they are bald, any kind of texture hair, even if it's very, very finely textured, is going to be lifted up from the scalp just a little bit. So usually you want to make sure you have enough space for the forehead, because if you start your forehead right here, it's going to look a bit weird. If you start your forehead up here, it's going to look like you're trying to draw the Mona Lisa or something like that. Some of my art students may remember me mentioning, though, in medieval times, a big forehead was considered very attractive. So that's why you see those gigantic foreheads on a lot of the older paintings from the medieval times. But I'm just going to do kind of swept back hair. And again, this is a place where you can have lots and lots of fun with the variations. If you do long hair, make sure that it goes all the way to the neck. Oh, she's looking a little bit 80s right now. Who knows who the flock of seagulls are? But if you do long hair, it goes all the way to the neck. You don't want it to just be like a straight line neck and then empty space right here, because that is not the way hair works. It goes behind our heads. I'm going to erase some of these guidelines here. And at this stage, like I said, once you start darkening, you can start erasing some of those light guidelines. Darken the lines that you want to keep. Be careful about dusting away with your fingers because you can smear your drawing. We don't want to do that. But those are your basic steps to drawing the generic proportions of a human face. So hopefully you guys had fun and you enjoyed this video, and I hope you like the drawing that you create after watching. Happy drawing! Big floofy hair. I love floofy hair. Alright, have a nice day, guys.